this program is really meant to introduce Kerala, particularly the little known or the unknown aspects of Kerala, to the country and to the world. And as always, it will be an interactive session. You can ask your questions and write out your remarks and your suggestions and put them in the chat box or the question box anytime. And I will request Dr. Sreenivasan to address them during the course of this conversation. Thank you, sir, for being on the show tonight. Let me just introduce Ambassador Sreenivasan as somebody who was born in Kerala, in Kayamkulam, which is central Kerala, and studied in Trivandrum. And then he left Kerala for like 40 years. He was in the Indian Foreign Service. He used to come back occasionally for holidays. But then he came back after 40 years, and he's been in Kerala since 2004. So who would be better to talk about Kerala, I thought, than somebody who was born here, brought up here, and then went away for 40 years. Such a person would know Kerala. But such a person would also not know Kerala because he has been away for so long. So when I requested Ambassador Sreenivasan that he should talk about the Kerala he knew, he said he would talk about the Kerala he does not know. He said that his actions from Kerala for that long, 4 decades, has left a wide gap in his understanding of Kerala. So the first puzzle I had to unravel is how would anyone talk about a thing he did not know about? Dr. Sreenivasan says he'd talk about Kerala which he does not know about. That puzzled me. You can talk about things you know, not about things that you don't know. And that was when I knew that Ambassador Sreenivasan was pulling my leg. Dr. Sreenivasan knows all about Kerala. Everything that is needed to know about Kerala, he knows it at the palm of his hand. So welcome, sir, to the conversation. Let me start by asking you, what is it about Kerala that you do not know, Ambassador?
Well, I explained to you the motivation for me to choose a subject like this because I have a 40-year gap in my understanding of Kerala. Whenever I want to stand up and talk about Kerala, anything, politics, education, culture, everything, I realize how much I don't know because of these 40 years. And these 40 years are not the current 40 years of international information and the internet and the flow of information, etc. And those were literally away from home. And whenever I try to catch up with something, I always find that there is a huge gap. And also because before I left, I was in a cocoon. I was a student most of the time, focusing simply on studies, not looking at around the world around me, politics least of all. And then a year in college when I was teaching, again, very protected kind of environment. And I was not thrown into the milieu of Kerala life before I left. So when I came back, the Kerala I found was new in very many ways. And this is what astonished me. And I've been trying to catch up with that knowledge. So in that process, I discovered many things remain undiscovered. But you are a person who has lived here, who has been in the government of Kerala. So I thought an exchange of views between somebody who has these gaps and somebody who has the direct first-hand knowledge of everything in Kerala would be an interesting subject. That is the only reason why I started this. And the first question that haunted me when I came back is, why is it called God's own country? People just keep on repeating, oh, welcome to the God's own country. We are so, and nobody has ever asked, why do you call yourself a God's own country? Which I asked, and I never use this in my own speeches. I never say God's own country because I haven't understood it. Of course, there are many, many theories. It is basically a tourism slogan, as I understand it. Oh, beautiful country, God's own country. I believe it was invented by the New Zealanders, not by us. And somebody simply copied it from the New Zealand literature, tourist literature. But there is more meaning to that being attributed to that. For example, Paramesh, one of the incarnations of Vishnu, Parasurama, threw his axe into the sea, and Kerala was formed because of that. So God's own country, created by God himself. Of course, there's a story behind it. I'm not going to go into that. And the other thing is that this is one
You
place.
answered your own question now.
Sorry? Sorry?
Please go ahead.
Okay.
I was going to say that you have answered your own question. It is Parashuram who threw the axe in the, that's
Yes,
perhaps why we call it God's own country. And I've got two sources for it. My batchmate, Jay Kumar, was tourism secretary, and he claims credit for it, as well as one of my shishyas, Amitabh Khan, who is CEO of Niti Aayog. He was, I think, tourism director. And I believe he also had something to contribute to the name. But of course, it is God's own country. And speaking of the gods, are there too many gods in Kerala? Are there too many rituals and religious places and too much
yes.
of...
Yes, that's what I discovered when I came
What do you
back.
think, having been...
There is an explosion of faith in Kerala. All these huge temples and churches and mosques that you see around were not there. And even the rituals were not there. The Attukal, the festival, which is famous all around the world, thousands and lakhs of people come to Trivandrum to it. Nobody ever thought of that for that particular temple. And where you have bigger temples, bigger churches, and therefore maybe somebody who comes to Kerala might think, oh, this is God's own country. But my theory is that this is none of these. This is basically we are escaping our responsibility. God's own country, let God take care of it. That is the attitude that I see. In fact, somebody asked me to write about the Trivandrum golf course. So I said, this is God's own golf course because nobody cuts the grass, nobody cleans the place. But when the rain comes, it gets cleaned up. When the summer comes, it gets warmed up. And then you are able to play without doing anything by human hands. So similarly, I thought that there was a little bit of an escapism here. That is, you don't have to work very hard. After all, this belongs to God. God help us and God will help. And that attitude has got into the minds of Keralites. I don't know whether you agree with that or
not. In a sense, yes. For example, I used to say always, and it comes back to me when you speak about, being laid back, is that you see, Kerala, I believe the word comes from the Kera Vriksha, the coconut tree. Now, the coconut tree is one tree where you plant it, and it's there for a lifetime. Your father planted it, your grandfather planted it. It's there for a lifetime. You fertilize it once in a year, and then it yields every month enough for you to live a very, very nice and happy life. So it makes us laid back. It makes us happy. Not lotus eaters really, but it does. So is that also the reason why people say that we are fairly cynical people? We are not only cynical about others, we are cynical, we are self-deprecating. We mock everyone, we mock ourselves. Do you think that is true? And if so, why?
no, we have this habit of, making somebody superhuman when somebody achieves something great. I remember when I was a child, we used to pray to Gandhiji as though he is God. Gandhiji has repeatedly said that he has nothing, he is a but down-to-earth man. But why do you consider Gandhi to be an avatar? Because you cannot accomplish that. You cannot reach that level of perfection. So we think he is God. Then we have no responsibility to rise to his level. So you exclude him. So many times we do that. We create these gods and goddesses, living gods and goddesses of human beings, basically because we want to separate ourselves or make that effort to either emulate them or try to be like them. And instead we say, oh, we are ordinary mortals, but these are gods. So in the whole attitude about Keralites in Kerala, I see that this kind of escapism is also part of this God's own country name, whether you agree or not. When God created the earth, he created Kerala as the best part of it. And also he created people for various states. So people in the other states, when they saw Kerala, they were astonished. What a beautiful country that you have created. So they went on a deputation to God and said, you have been very unfair, that you have given us all these dry zones and, no rivers and no greens, nothing. And how come that you have been so generous and so discriminatory? And then he said, wait till you see Malayalis. Then it became the turn of the Keralites to go and complain to God. So they went to God and said, why have you done this? You have given us a beautiful country, but why have you made us like this? So God said, okay, I'll give you a boon. That is, those of you who take a flight from Nedumbassery and go abroad, then you will transform yourself into perfect beings. This is the story. This is very flattering to overseas Keralites. so some transformation like that takes place. That is why you find that Keralites who are at a concert in Kerala will not be so law-abiding and careful and well-dressed and so on when you go to a Yeshudas concert. But you go to the same Yeshudas concert in New York, they are all dressed up properly, nobody makes any noise, they're very gentle, etc., etc. So this kind of a change, it might be because of the professions, because the way they live, it may be because of the situation in the country, etc., etc. But there is a difference between Keralites in Kerala, of course there are exceptions on both sides, and people whom I met in the last 40 years in other parts of the world. Look at the way we greet people. Strangely, maybe because of the language, we really do not have a Kerala way of greeting people. Most of the time we say good morning, or we may say namaste, or we may say something, but nothing that is, see, I have lived in a country like Japan, where your social life is regulated by the language you use. You know, there is a set expression for everything. When you meet a person, when you walk into a shop, every salesman in that shop will shout, "Irashaimase," welcome to our shop. And it is no difference. Any part of Japan you go, you will say that. Or when you will sit at a meal, the hostess will come and say, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, I have not cooked anything today, but we have some leftovers, please try." That's what she will say. It is meant to be said like that. So it's like that there are patterns of behavior, patterns of greeting, patterns of established customs that you don't see very much in Kerala. Because like, for example, when you see somebody, what do you say? You may not necessarily say namaste. You may say, "Where are you going?" Right? And then he'll say, "Oh, I'm just going," or some such thing. So there is no formal kind of a linguistic usage. How many of us say thank you in Malayalam? Have you ever heard of the word Nandi anywhere? If you say Nandi, every Malayali will stare at you. What is he talking about? Where has he come from? So why is it that the language has not adapted itself to these
very true, Ambassador Sreenivasan. I have tried to say Nandi many times, and sometimes because people don't respond, people think it's very strange. I don't. Then I go to, I find it so difficult. And that applies to many other things as well. Have you noticed that no self-respecting Malayali will say, "Ivalende bharyana," she is my wife. They'll always say, "Ivalende wife-ana," "Ivalende better half-ana." She's my better half. There is this reluctance to say bharya in Malayalam. Similarly, they'll never say, I mean, when I was young, they used to say it, "Did you have your food?" But today they will never say that. Today they will always say food. It's never bhakshanam, it's always food. So you're so right. I think is this because we are literate and perhaps we need to educate ourselves a little bit more?
Yeah, maybe, but even the older times, I don't know, even before the influx of English language, etc. But still, I think the language did not develop. Maybe we should develop a dictionary of greetings that other countries have, and that we don't have. But that's so. But the other thing is that we don't hesitate to comment on other people's physique, for example. You know, now, "Oh, you are looking very fair," or "How have you become so dark?" Or "Oh, but you probably don't take any exercise. You, you developed a paunch." And this is another aspect which I have noticed, because we don't find it delicate to talk about another person's physical features. And of course, it's not meant as any kind of criticism or any kind, but this is a habit that we have developed. So these are the kind of things that I was saying that would make an outsider see it as different and a little bit strange. Having been born here, for me, it is not strange. But what I see, these are things which we can improve. We can make it, our culture, more sophisticated by adopting some of these in our own. The one great thing about the Kerala is we are all very individualistic. And we are able to perform best when you are doing something alone. But when it comes to a group behavior, then we suddenly transform. This is probably partly also because of the influence of politics. Because over politicization, which identifies every group as some kind of a gang or some kind of a group from which you have to either join or you have to keep out. And therefore, the society activities, the activities that we have to do collectively, we are not able to do because of this individual strength. And this I have seen in Japan, for example, an individual will not be as impressive as a Keralite or as an Indian. But when it comes to a group, or when it comes to the discipline of a group, then suddenly they become very productive. And this is one thing that I have noticed here also, because this is something which others will notice.
I'm going to interrupt you there a little bit, Ambassador, because I've got a nice comment, which is coming from somebody who styles himself as RPA. He says, speaking of God's own country, he says, it's not only Lord Parashurama, but also Vamana visited Kerala during Mahabali's time. That makes two. That makes two gods. And then Saint Thomas, the apostle of Christ, also is said to have. So we have two gods and an apostle. So it is. He says it's something which is extraordinary.
But I was coming to
RPA is, but
I was going to mention the Mahabali story in another context. Of course, this is true that Vamana came and saved Kerala from the evils of an Asura king, isn't it? That is the concept, and therefore it became God's country again. But there is another story about Mahabali which we must think, because Mahabali is not simply that we are thinking of a world which never existed. And in a sense, we are actually creating that world for the sake of Mahabali, who is visiting you every year. Right? So that particular day when Mahabali is here, we all, in a sense, pretend that we were as prosperous and as happy as we were during his lifetime. And then the next day we forget it. That's what we do. And therefore, there is a certain amount of pretension in the Mahabali story, but also there is a certain amount of imagination. Because what we hear in Mahabali's song is the song of an ideal world. So in our imagination, we are saying that this is the kind of world that we should build.
Let me move on to the way we dress. We are so well dressed in the sense that the white and white of our dhoti and a white shirt, the white mundu with a kuli lakkada with a zari border, that's exquisite, isn't it? So we have a dress sense which is exquisite across the world. And when I say that, I also would like to point out that I did my schooling and I did my first 2 years of college in Chennai. I was in, and then I came and joined the Sacred Heart College here many years ago. And when there, what struck me was everybody wearing, all the students, everyone wearing pure white dhotis and white shirts. I was the only one wearing a pant. I stood out. They called me a foreigner. But today, if I go to the same Sacred Heart College, wearing a dhoti, and I'm wearing one now, I'll be about the only one who will be wearing a dhoti. Everybody else would be wearing a pant and a shirt. So that's contrast in our dressing. We are giving up something which has been very good to us. The white and white dhoti, whether it's a man or a woman. What do you think about these changes in our dress sense?
Well, when I recently wrote about Trivandrum, you may have noticed one thing I said was, after having lived in minus 40 degrees and plus 40 degrees, I find Kerala very comfortable. You know, average temperatures. And you don't have to change your clothes depending on the weather. throughout the year, you can live with a dhoti and a shirt. And even if you change into a trouser, we do not have to change the texture. You don't have to invest too much in too many clothes and styles of clothes, and you don't need woolens, and these are all very comfortable. So on clothing, I think Kerala is very comfortable, and they have not gone for, of course, in the old days, we see people with a munda and an overcoat over it, the more sophisticated people. But all that has gone. A simple white shirt and white dhoti has become very acceptable, and it is very graceful, I think. And I have no particular observation on that. Actually, you should always dress for the weather that you are in. That once when I used to appear with a suit in the on television programs, I changed it because I thought that I should reflect the weather conditions within which you live rather than something else. So that, I think, is a good thing. I mean, none of these I'm saying is bad, but this kind of thing. The other thing I wanted to point out was our hesitation or to make changes in various things. Education is an obvious example, because we tend to go back and back. Now we have online education come because we were thrown into the water and we have to swim. But when we had a choice, we did not accept that. We did not accept the so many changes that people were recommending. As a result of that, what happens is the majority of people in Kerala remain in the old system, the old college system, the old syllabus, etc. While the richer and the more fortunate ones are able to go out of Kerala, out of India, and so on. So, and that is a general feature, I think, of our trying to remain within our own system, which we feel is adequate enough. But the challenges of the world, even after you see that many of them live abroad, the challenges of the world, we are not willing to accept that. And that change is getting very slow in Kerala. You agree with that?
To a large extent, yes. I would also rate all this to be part of a universal human behavior, not very exclusive to Kerala, but I'm not going to get into a debate on that. I'm going to move on. I'm not going to ask you, sir, whether you drink, whether you enjoy your scotch on the rocks, or like James Bond, whether you like your martini shaken not stirred. I'm not going to ask you that. But drink, sorry, yeah, but Kerala has a drinking habit. It's not so much that people drink, which is everybody drinks across the world. It's also perhaps that at least a certain section, the drink goes overboard. Is that something you find something that when you come back after many years? My grandfather, for example, was somebody who would not permit anybody who was known to have drunk in his life anywhere within our compound. That was the sort of Kerala we lived in. But today it's very difficult to find somebody who doesn't drink. So what is your take on that? What do you think has changed?
On drinking,
how do we change? I mean, not that I'm a...
No, on drinking, what I found out was more people drink than we think. Because we think that it is some kind of an evil and therefore should be hidden. You go to a party and you're living in the living room, somebody will come and offer you orange juice and soda, etc. And then the host will come and say, shall we go upstairs? Or something like that. When you go upstairs, there are 100 people sitting and drinking there. So it is still not an accepted norm, particularly in homes. It is considered to be some kind of an evil we should avoid, or at least we should not let others know. But the amount of drinking that is going on in Kerala and making it a necessary element of our social life and our economy is something astonishing, which surprised me a lot. This I had not seen when I was here 40 years ago. I think in other systems, this is much more liberal, if at all, and much more limited and so on. And the other thing is the linkage between politics and religion. This is something which is very striking when you come back to Kerala, because the religions have become some kind of unofficial political parties in Kerala. This I have not seen anywhere else. There may be some people belonging to a particular religion may be inclined towards socialism, another may be inclined towards capitalism, etc., etc. But here the organized groups of religious groups becoming the political force in the country. But of course, now it is all over India. But in Kerala is where we started it, because a politician has to go to religious groups and get their support and approval in order to be successful. And that is one other thing that I noticed.